ATF agreed to, in 2012, should not be under the jurisdiction of your rule?
Getting assault weapons, AR-15s, out of the hands of people who shouldn't have them.
Holding it a certain way, it'll continue to bump back and forth against my trigger finger.
Second Amendment protects firearms in common use at the time and also said this, quote, for lawful purposes like self-defense.
Recent Supreme Court deliberations on a pivotal Second Amendment regulation sparked a 5-4 split. Explore how the decision preserves ATF's rule, shaping the future of firearm assembly and ownership. Second Amendment legal victory. The Second Amendment of the United States Constitution guarantees the right of citizens to keep and bear arms. It's a deeply debated and litigated aspect of constitutional law, with various cases shaping the interpretation and application of this right. In this particular case, the ATF had issued a new rule regarding frames and receivers, components crucial to the functioning of firearms. The Firearms Policy Coalition and Tactical Machining, acting as original plaintiffs, contested this rule in court. Their objective was to secure a preliminary injunction, a legal order that would temporarily halt the ATF from enforcing this new rule. This tactic aimed to preserve the status quo while the case underwent thorough legal examination. Remarkably, Judge Reed O'Connor decided in favor of the plaintiffs, granting a limited preliminary injunction. This was a significant win for Second Amendment advocates. It effectively prevented the ATF from applying the new rule against Tactical Machining and its customers. This decision indicated that the judge found merit in the argument that the ATF's rule potentially encroached on individuals' rights to possess firearms as protected by the Second Amendment. Following this preliminary injunction, the case saw the inclusion of additional companies, including Black Hawk Manufacturing, Defense Distributed, and 80% Arms as new plaintiffs. They sought comparable protections to those granted to Tactical Machining. The court ruled in their favor, broadening the scope of the preliminary injunction. This extension of protection further reinforced the notion that the ATF's rule was potentially in conflict with Second Amendment rights. The subsequent motion for summary judgment was a pivotal phase in the case. The plaintiffs, led by the FPC, aimed to secure a comprehensive victory by asking the court to make a final decision based on the presented evidence and arguments. Judge O'Connor agreed with the plaintiff's position and granted the motion. This resulted in the complete vacating of the frames and receivers rule. Such a nationwide vacatur represented a major triumph for Second Amendment advocates, as it essentially nullified the ATF's attempt to enforce the rule anywhere in the U.S. This case underscores the vital role that the judiciary plays in interpreting and safeguarding constitutional rights, particularly those as contentious as the right to bear arms. The decision in the Vanderstock case not only marked a significant legal victory for Second Amendment rights, but also demonstrated the potency of the judicial system in balancing the interests of regulatory agencies with fundamental constitutional protections. Supreme Court halts ATF. Let's delve deeper into the procedural steps and legal implications following Judge O'Connor's summary judgment in the Vanderstock v. Garland Frames and Receivers case. After Judge O'Connor's sweeping summary judgment that vacated the ATF's frames and receivers rule, it was evident that the ATF would challenge this decision. They promptly filed an appeal to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. This move signaled their intention to contest the ruling and seek a different outcome at the appellate level. Simultaneously with the appeal, the ATF also sought a stay from the courts. A stay is a legal order that temporarily halts the enforcement of a judgment or decision while the case is under appeal. In this context, the ATF wanted to continue enforcing the frames and receivers rule despite Judge O'Connor's decision. They hoped to maintain the status quo until the appellate process concluded. Both Judge O'Connor and the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals denied the ATF's request for a stay. This was a pivotal development in the case. It meant that, as of that point, the ATF was not allowed to enforce the frames and receivers rule while the case was being appealed. This denial underscored the significance of Judge O'Connor's original decision. Faced with denials at both the District Court and the Fifth Circuit, the ATF turned to the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court.
Some months later, during an ATF audit, I was told the background check was now a non-approval.
In areas that are poor, mostly minority, there's a mass shooting.
They filed an emergency application seeking a stay from the Supreme Court. This was a crucial move for the ATF, as a stay from the Supreme Court would allow them to resume enforcement of the rule. Justice Allo, upon receiving the ATF's emergency application, referred the request to the full Supreme Court. This is a standard process when a significant legal issue requires consideration by the entire court rather than a single justice. In a closely divided decision, the Supreme Court ultimately granted the stay. This decision had a profound impact on the case. It meant that the enforcement of Judge O'Connor's decision was temporarily put on hold while the appeal proceeded at the Fifth Circuit. The 5-4 split suggests that this was a contentious and significant legal matter. The Supreme Court's order specified that it applied to the June 30, 2023 order and the July 5, 2023 judgment of the United States District Court for the Northern District of Texas. These judgments had effectively vacated the ATF's frames and receivers rule. The stay granted by the Supreme Court would remain in effect until the disposition of the appeal in the Fifth Circuit. Additionally, the order outlined that if a petition for a writ of certiorari were timely sought and subsequently denied, meaning the Supreme Court declined to review the case, the stay would automatically terminate. However, if the certiorari were granted, the stay would persist until the Supreme Court issued its final judgment on the case. This sequence of events showcases the complex legal maneuvers and strategic decisions involved in high-stakes cases like Vanderstock versus Garland frames and receivers. The Supreme Court's intervention was a decisive moment, shaping the course of the legal proceedings and influencing the enforcement of the ATF's rule. Supreme Court split decision. The 4-4 split among the justices on the question of granting a stay indicates a division within the court. Justices Thomas, Allo, Gorsuch, and Kavanaugh were inclined to deny the application for a stay. This bloc likely held a conservative viewpoint, believing that the ATF should be allowed to continue enforcing the frames and receivers rule during the appeal process. However, this coalition did not reach the majority threshold needed to grant the stay. Notably, Chief Justice Roberts and Justice Amy Coney Barrett, who are typically considered conservative-leaning justices, align with the liberal justices in granting the ATF's request for a stay. This alignment, which might be considered surprising given their usual ideological leanings, underscores the nuanced nature of legal decisions. It also highlights how specific cases can bring forth unique considerations that may not always align with broader ideological affiliations. The 4-4 decision allows the ATF to maintain enforcement of the frames and receivers rule while the case proceeds in the Fifth Circuit. This has practical implications, as it means that the rule continues to be in effect, potentially impacting individuals' rights related to firearms. The recent oral arguments in the Fifth Circuit represent a critical phase in the legal process. This is where both parties have the opportunity to present their arguments, respond to questions from the judges, and clarify any legal points. The judges, in turn, have the chance to scrutinize the arguments and seek clarification on any complex legal issues. The observation that the Fifth Circuit judges were critical of the ATF's frames and receivers rule is a significant development. It suggests that the panel may be leaning towards a decision that opposes the ATF's position. The judges' skepticism regarding the rule's alignment with federal laws is a pivotal factor that may weigh heavily in their final decision. The case now hinges on the Fifth Circuit's decision. Their ruling will determine the fate of the frames and receivers rule and have far-reaching implications for Second Amendment rights and firearm regulation. This situation exemplifies the intricate and dynamic nature of legal proceedings, where individual justices' perspectives, unexpected alignments, and the outcome of oral arguments all play crucial roles in shaping the ultimate decision. The Fifth Circuit's ruling will ultimately decide the trajectory of the case and its impact on firearm regulation in this context. Emergency injunction granted. The current status of the Vanderstock versus Garland frames and receivers case is one of anticipation. The central issue at this juncture is whether the summary judgment issued by Judge O'Connor was appropriate or not. This judgment will significantly impact the overall outcome of the case and its implications for firearm regulations. It's crucial to understand that this case involves two distinct groups of plaintiffs. The original plaintiffs, represented by the Firearms Policy Coalition, initiated the lawsuit. Later in the legal process, intervener plaintiffs, namely Defense Distributed and 80% Arms, joined the case to support the original plaintiffs' cause and protect their interests. In response to the evolving legal landscape, 80% Arms and Defense Distributed took proactive measures. They filed an emergency motion for a preliminary injunction. Essentially, they returned to Judge O'Connor's court, arguing that given recent developments, they required an emergency injunction to restore the protections they enjoyed before these legal proceedings unfolded. The primary objective of this emergency motion was to maintain the status quo that existed before the recent legal maneuvers. Specifically, they aim to safeguard the protections that were previously granted through the preliminary injunction issued by Judge O'Connor. These protections extended not only to the companies themselves, but also to their customers.
So many people who are opposed to the Second Amendment,
running for President of the United States, wanted to strip away our enumerated constitutional rights.
It's essential to clarify the scope of the stay issued by the Supreme Court. When the ATF sought and obtained a stay, it pertains specifically to the summary judgment decision and the vacatur issued by Judge O'Connor. Importantly, this stay did not nullify the prior preliminary injunctions that Judge O'Connor had granted. After carefully considering the arguments presented by 80% Arms and Defense Distributed, Judge O'Connor affirmed their position. He acknowledged that he still possessed the authority to extend emergency preliminary injunction protections to these companies and their customers. In response, Judge O'Connor granted a preliminary injunction, thereby reinstating protections and preserving the status quo for both the companies and their customer base. In essence, the recent granting of the preliminary injunction represents a strategic legal maneuver by 80% Arms and Defense Distributed. By securing this injunction, they have effectively maintained the legal protections they enjoyed before recent legal developments. This decision is pivotal as it ensures that both companies and their customers are shielded from potential adverse effects of the ATF's rule while the case continues to progress through the legal system. Judge O'Connor's rationale. In his order, Judge O'Connor meticulously considered the arguments presented, the evidence submitted, and the relevant legal principles. Based on this comprehensive examination, he asserted that the court possesses ancillary jurisdiction to enforce equitable remedies. This pertains specifically to the portions of his summary judgment order and final judgment that continue to be in effect despite the stay ordered by the Supreme Court of the U.S. Judge O'Connor then evaluated the relevant factors at play and determined that they favored the granting of injunctive relief to the intervener plaintiffs. This implies that based on his assessment, the circumstances and legal considerations weighed in favor of providing this particular form of legal protection to the interveners. The relief granted by Judge O'Connor is designed to closely mirror the protections previously extended to the intervener plaintiffs during the preliminary injunction stage. This indicates that the judge aimed to reinstate the same level of legal safeguard that was previously in place for these parties. Additionally, Judge O'Connor ordered an extended effective period for this relief. This period is designed to align with the expiration timetable outlined in the stay order issued by the Supreme Court of the U.S. on August 8, 2023. Essentially, this means that the protections granted by Judge O'Connor will remain in force until the same time that the Supreme Court stay order expires. As a result of this ruling, Judge O'Connor effectively reinstated the emergency preliminary injunctions that he had previously issued to specific companies, including Defense Distributed and 80% Arms. This decision carries significant practical implications as it means that these companies and their customers will be once again shielded from the potential adverse effects of the ATF's rule. The ATF argued against this course of action, contending that the Supreme Court's recent stay, issued in August, precluded Judge O'Connor from halting any aspect of the rule. However, Judge O'Connor's ruling reflects his disagreement with this perspective. He affirmed his authority to issue injunctions that protect individual plaintiffs, asserting that the stay order did not strip him of his power. In essence, Judge O'Connor's decision represents a significant legal development. By granting the emergency preliminary injunction, he effectively restores the previous legal safeguards for specific companies and their customer base. This ruling showcases the judge's determination to safeguard the rights and interests of individual plaintiffs, even in the face of higher court decisions. Judge O'Connor's protective ruling. Judge O'Connor's assertion that the Supreme Court stay specifically targeted the impact of any nationwide vacatur of the rule is a critical point. This means that while the Supreme Court intervened to address the broader implications of the case, it did not curtail Judge O'Connor's authority to protect specific companies, individual plaintiffs, and their respective customer bases. Judge O'Connor firmly maintained his authority to take action in the best interest of the involved parties. Despite the Supreme Court's intervention, he emphasized that he still possessed the jurisdiction to safeguard the interests of the specific companies and individual plaintiffs involved, along with their respective customers. This underscores Judge O'Connor's commitment to ensuring that the rights of these parties are preserved. The core outcome of Judge O'Connor's decision is the issuance of a new emergency injunction. This injunction effectively reestablishes the legal protections and safeguards that were previously in place for specific companies and their customers. By doing so, Judge O'Connor seeks to ensure that these parties can continue their operations under the legal framework that was originally established.
When somebody bump fires, think of this as a bump fire stock and able to move.
They were assaulted and shot by someone and couldn't defend themselves because their guns were taken from them.
Given the complexity and high stakes of this legal battle, it is anticipated that the ATF may pursue further legal avenues to challenge Judge O'Connor's decision. This could involve seeking a halt through the Fifth Circuit or potentially escalating the matter to the Supreme Court. These anticipated challenges highlight the significance of the ongoing legal battle and the potential for further developments in the case. Judge O'Connor's primary objective in issuing this new emergency injunction is to maintain the status quo. By reinstating the prior protections, he aims to ensure that the affected parties continue to operate under the legal safeguards that were originally put in place. This approach reflects Judge O'Connor's dedication to upholding the rights and interests of the parties involved, even in the face of complex legal proceedings. In swift, Judge O'Connor's decision represents a pivotal moment in the case. It reaffirms his commitment to protecting the rights and interests of specific companies, individual plaintiffs, and their customers. The decision sets the stage for potential further legal battles and underscores the importance of understanding the nuanced procedural aspects of complex cases like this one. Legal battle over firearm regulations. The Supreme Court's decision to grant a stay represents a significant legal intervention. This stay specifically addresses certain aspects related to the vacatur of the rule. While it provides a temporary resolution, it also indicates that there are crucial legal questions that require further examination. The recent hearings in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals focused on the motion for summary judgment. This motion is pivotal as it directly addresses the appropriateness of Judge O'Connor's earlier decision to grant summary judgment. The outcome of these proceedings will have far-reaching consequences on the overall trajectory of the case. Simultaneous to these developments, Judge O'Connor took action by granting an emergency preliminary injunction. This move underscores the judge's commitment to ensuring that specific companies and their customers are shielded from potential adverse effects resulting from the ATF's rule. This injunction serves to maintain the status quo and protect the rights of those involved. Of note is Judge O'Connor's steadfast assertion of his jurisdiction and authority. He maintains that the Supreme Court stay does not diminish his ability to provide individual relief to the plaintiffs in this case. This underscores the nuanced interplay between different levels of the judiciary and their respective roles in interpreting and enforcing the law. It is highly anticipated that the ATF will aggressively seek further legal action. This may involve appealing to both the Fifth Circuit and potentially even the Supreme Court. These anticipated legal challenges will be pivotal in shaping the ultimate outcome of the case and will likely address fundamental legal questions surrounding firearms regulations and the Second Amendment rights. The evolving legal landscape underscores the dynamic nature of this case. With potential appeals, motions, and rulings on the horizon, the situation remains fluid. Staying informed and engaged with the evolving proceedings will be essential for those impacted by the ATF's rule. It's a testament to the complexities and intricacies of the legal process. In conclusion, the ongoing legal battle surrounding the ATF's rule on frames and receivers is a multifaceted and legally significant case. The interplay between various legal actors, including Judge O'Connor, the Fifth Circuit, and the Supreme Court, highlights the complexity of addressing constitutional and regulatory issues. The final outcome will have profound implications on the interpretation and application of Second Amendment rights. Supreme Court upholds firearm regulation. In a recent 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court chose to maintain a crucial regulation on frames and receivers, effectively avoiding an emergency order. This ruling, while not providing explicit reasons, highlights the complexity of gun control debates and underscores the court's role in balancing individual rights with broader societal interests, particularly regarding the Second Amendment. The regulation, central to President Biden's comprehensive strategy to combat gun violence, addresses the surging popularity of specific firearms, notably those constructed from frames and receivers. The Biden administration argues that these weapons have seen a significant increase in usage, especially among individuals legally barred from obtaining conventional firearms. The Supreme Court's decision, though provisional, keeps the regulation intact and enforces its provisions during the ongoing legal challenge. This demonstrates the court's recognition of the urgency and significance of the matter. While the ruling did not come with a detailed explanation, this is customary when the justices act on emergency applications. The 5-4 vote signifies a narrow majority in favor of upholding the regulation. Notably, Chief Justice John G. Roberts Jr. and Justice Amy Coney Barrett, often considered conservative-leaning members of the court,
who showed up here said one thing that felt good about doing this kind of event was that they felt empowered.
A constitutionally protected industry would know something about firearms.
sided with the liberal justices, Justices Sonia Sotomayor, Elena Kagan, and Ketanji Brown Jackson, to form the majority. This alignment showcases the intricate nature of gun control debates, which do not always follow ideological lines. This decision carries substantial implications. Firstly, it addresses the pressing concerns surrounding the accessibility and use of certain firearms. By maintaining the regulation, the court acknowledges the immediate need to address gun violence and protect public safety. Secondly, it underscores the court's role in mediating between individual rights and broader societal interests. While the Second Amendment protects the right to bear arms, it also permits reasonable regulation in the interest of public safety. Furthermore, this ruling sets a precedent for future legal battles and potential gun control measures. It signals that the court is willing to engage with and make determinations on issues related to firearms regulation, even in the midst of significant societal and political debates. As this legal challenge proceeds, it is expected to spark further discussion and debate on the broader subject of gun control in the U.S. Advocates on both sides of the issue will closely monitor the proceedings, as the outcome could have profound implications for the interpretation and application of the Second Amendment. In conclusion, the recent 5-4 decision by the Supreme Court to uphold the regulation on frames and receivers signifies a significant step in the broader effort to address gun violence. This ruling acknowledges the urgency of the issue and affirms the necessity for reasonable regulations to safeguard public safety. It also emphasizes the intricate nature of gun control debates and underscores the court's pivotal role in balancing individual rights with broader societal interests, particularly in the context of the Second Amendment. As this legal challenge continues, it is poised to shape the interpretation and application of the Second Amendment in the U.S. 2A regulation upheld. In a closely contested 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court recently upheld a key ATF regulation on frames and receivers. This ruling, marked by a division among the justices, illustrates the intricate nature of gun control debates and highlights varying interpretations of the law. This regulation, enacted by the ATF in 2022, aimed to redefine the parameters of a firearm under the Gun Control Act of 1968. This change was prompted by an urgent concern over the proliferation of untraceable firearms, according to Solicitor General Elizabeth B. Proligar, who represented the Biden administration. Notably, the new regulation did not outright prohibit the sale or possession of kits and components used in firearm assembly. Instead, it introduced additional requirements for manufacturers and sellers, including obtaining licenses, affixing serial numbers, and conducting background checks. This adjustment sought to strike a balance between public safety and Second Amendment rights. Various stakeholders, including gun owners, advocacy groups, and companies involved in firearm kit production, challenged the regulation in court. Their arguments centered on the belief that the ATF overstepped its authority under the 1968 law. The Gun Control Act of 1968 defined firearms to include weapons readily convertible for explosive projectile expulsion and the frames or receivers of such weapons. This legal interpretation formed the heart of the dispute. Federal District Court Judge Reed O'Connor sided with the challengers, asserting that a weapons parts kit did not meet the criteria of a firearm. He further emphasized that an item with the potential for functional conversion into a receiver did not inherently qualify as a receiver. Judge O'Connor underscored that addressing perceived policy loopholes was Congress's responsibility, not the judiciary's.
We can expect in the future that more people will be carrying handguns on the streets in places like Los Angeles, Boston, and New York City.
Because he was the only person with a gun. There was no good guy with a gun.
The controversy escalated when a 3-judge panel of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit in New Orleans opted not to grant a stay on key aspects of Judge O'Connor's ruling. This decision solidified the contentious nature of the ATF's extended interpretation and set the stage for the subsequent Supreme Court ruling. The Supreme Court's narrowly decided ruling maintains the ATF's redefined parameters. The dissenting justices who made up the 5-4 split, raised concerns over the expansive regulatory authority. Their decision to withhold explicit reasoning leaves room for ongoing legal discourse. In conclusion, the recent Supreme Court decision to uphold the ATF regulation on frames and receivers exemplifies the complex and evolving nature of gun control debates. This ruling holds implications not only for firearm kit and component regulation, but also for the broader conversation surrounding public safety and Second Amendment rights. The division among justices underscores the intricate legal terrain of Second Amendment jurisprudence in the United States. That's all for this video, folks. We'll see you next time.